Alright, hello everyone. Today we're coming at you with a little bit of a different guide. We're doing an Augmentation Evoker guide for Mythic Plus, since Augmentation just came out, and it's a pretty fun class I've been having some fun with, so I want to make a quick little guide for you guys on it, even though it's not Death Knight related. So starting off, we'll work through some talents. We have a pretty standard build with a couple points to flex, so the new Evoker tree, since Augmentation dropped, it's been changed. So what we're doing pretty much is just coming down the right side here so we can pick up our Verdant Embrace, our Cauterize, and our Healing Stored. This is kind of our healing section is the right side of this tree, where the left is kind of damaged, the middle is kind of buffing. Coming down the middle we get Obsidian Scales, we get our Landslide, our Kick is on the left side here. And then we don't take anything to connect, we just come right into Tip the Scales, because obviously that's required. A bunch of little buffs here. Something that changed now is Source of Magic's a lot easier to get, and it's really, really good for Mythic Plus, because it increases the target's healing and damage done, so it just gives our healer a nice little buff and damage increase there, as well as giving them mana, obviously. And then a Pressing Roar in coordinator groups is actually really, really good. We can get some big CC out on some priority ads if needed. We also take Overawe pretty standard, unless there's weeks like Incorp where we need Sleepwalk. You can just take that out and take Sleepwalk to help with that. If not, I'd usually keep this because removing enrages is really good. There's a lot of mobs that enrage. On weeks like this week where we have raging, obviously it's really good. It also decreases the cooldown of it, so nice. We come down here and take Breath of Eon stun, unlike in Raid, because that 3-second stun on an AoE pack is really, really nice. We get Rescue, obviously, and 1 extra charge of Hover. Another thing we get now is Twin Guardian, giving an Absorb shield. So Rescue can be used as like a pseudo heal, because you're putting a nice little shield on you and whoever you rescue. You take your personal defensive over here, obviously. You reduce its cooldown, and then finally Zephyr, which is a really good defensive cooldown for our party. We'll talk about that later in the defensive section. Moving over into the Aug tree itself. So obviously our biggest button as augmentation is Ebb and Might. Increases your foreign nearest ally's primary stat and increases the damage you deal. And this duration is increased by a ton of things in our tree, just most of your empowers, as well as Eruption and Breath of Eons. You come down the right side a little bit to get your Essence Burst and 2 charges of that. Your Living Flames jumping, and then your Cheat Death. This Cheat Death is actually really nice. It's passive once, you don't have to worry about pressing it. And that's all we take on the right side here for now. You come down, you get your Eruption, you get your Kick cooldown reduced, and then you're kind of moving through getting your Upheaval, getting your Breath of Eons, which is your big button we'll talk about in Meditation. Chrono Ward is really great because it gives everyone a shield as you do damage with Breath of Eons. And then you come down into Blistering Scales and Draconic Attunements. Attunements, we'll talk about that later in the utility section. But it basically gives you increased health and movement speed for your whole party that can be buffed later on by this next talent, Aspect's Favor. So it basically counts as a Rally or a Stampeding Roar, depending if you hover Obsidian Scales. Really, really great utility you have. And then you kind of come down here and fill out the bottom like this. Crash Against, another big button we'll talk about. And then you come down and get Fate Mirror. And I like Interwoven Threads, just that 10% DR for the entire dungeon is nice, not having to worry about when to press time skip. If you wanted to come out of that, you could potentially get this pseudo defensive with your Breath of Eons. You could take the Lust when you land. Not a terrible talent. Most aren't really worth it, and Overlord is not really worth it either, honestly. It's kind of our standard loadout for the most part. Those 1 or 2 changes you can do. Alright, running right into stats. So as augmentation, the biggest thing you want is intellect because of Ebb and Might. So the more primary stat you have, the more primary stat you give to your party. So pretty much eye level is king on most items. And you're going to want trinkets that give you intellect, except for Radius Fragment. We'll talk about that later. So pretty much as much int as you can get. And then you want to stack Mastery. I'm still gearing this guy, so my Mastery is not that good yet. Tomorrow's Tuesday, so I haven't crafted anything, so I'm waiting for Vault. But so what our mastery does is when you cast an Empower spell, you give somebody Shifting Sands, which increases their verse by 16%, well, by a certain percent for a certain amount of time. And that percent and time goes up as you get more mastery. So you basically want every single piece of gear you have to have mastery to increase the verse you give people and increase the duration of that verse. And if you don't know what verse does, it's basically just a straight up 20% damage buff or a healing buff for your healer. And it's DR as well for half your verse. So that's why we really want to stack mastery, so we're giving out as much verse as we can to our teammates. And it also increases the duration of our Shifting Sands or Breath of Eons and other auras as we get more mastery as well. After that, everything else really isn't that good for us. I'm trying to stack a little more haste so I can get more casts out, and then crit and verse are just kind of there. So like I said, you really want to focus on that mastery. Alright, so as far as certain pieces of gear you want, the glaring one this guy doesn't have yet is right here. You want to get the Evoker Legendary. The Evoker Legendary is absolutely crazy. So obviously I don't have the Evoker Legendary yet, but you can see the tooltip right here. First of all, it's 457 eye level. It gives you so much intellect, and it also has mastery on it, which is coincidentally our best stat. And then just the equip effect is crazy. You'll randomly give an ally a ton of primary stat and speed. So we want to be killing Sarkareth every week to try to get that. For trinkets, you 100% want Iridius Fragment. Why? 1, it gives us mastery, and 2, the on-use effect is it gives you intellect. So you'll be popping that before you press Ebon Might to give your teammates extra main stat with your Ebon Might. Your next trinket, I've just had this since before Augmentation came out. Some intellect, it gives you some secondary stat. You'll probably want a different stat stick with intellect on it. Obviously, you could be getting, this point in the season, you might be getting Chromatic Essence. If you get that, you'll want to put the mastery buff on it. You can get, obviously, class trinket is really good for us too. I mean, it's crit, which isn't great, but you get the int buff is up pretty often. I wouldn't really recommend Beacon. We don't get any more int from it. We're already not getting int from our trinket. Rings, I'm going crafted ring. I'll be upgrading that next week. And then right now I have this ring because it has giant mastery on it. You can get that from Brackenhide. You could get ring from Neltharis, which also has big mastery on it and crit. You could get ring from Boss, also big mastery. You pretty much just want to get the biggest ring you can with the most mastery on it for your second ring. For a belt, I would craft a belt. There's not really any good big mastery belts. I don't have one right now. I'll probably craft one next week. I ironically got the best boots in the game for us from the dungeon event box. You want to get Sarkareth boots. They have big mastery on them. And that's pretty much it. I don't really have a good neck right now. You'll want the neck from Vortex if you can get it. Small haste, big mastery. You want to try to get this one if you can. And then moving into embellishments. I really recommend Spore Cloak. It's really nice. It keeps you alive. Gives you an absorb shield. And then for your second one, it could be a couple of things. You could go arm guards. I've had this from when I was playing Preservation. As a support class, you actually might want to go with the engineering ones because it can just give you huge mastery and you have a B-res. So as a support class, you could be the one doing the B-res, so you don't have to worry about your healer or tank having to do that. Or you could go the toxic boots. Up to you. I'm generally running with the Spore Cloak and either this or I might switch to engineering when I get some more crests. Moving into our tier set. So pretty basic tier set. Ebon Might increases the damage of your empower spells, and Ebon Might increases your allies' primary stats by more. Not really much to talk about there. It's just a nice stat buff tier set. So moving into our rotation. So what you'll want to do is, we'll talk about this a little bit right now. We have Prescience. And what this is it gives one of our allies 3% crit as well as copying their damage and healing spells, or having a chance to copy their damage and healing spells. So you're in a dungeon, you're always going to want to put this on your DPS, obviously. And it lasts, as you can see, it lasts for 21 seconds. It's 11-second cooldown. So you'll be having this up on both DPS, ideally the entire dungeon. You always want to have it on someone. If it's off cooldown, you want to use it to refresh it on someone. So that's my little spiel about Prescience. So you'll want to be pre-popping that on people. You'll want to pre-pop your blistering scales on your tank. Ideally, we'll talk a little bit more about blistering scales in the defensive section. And then, so for your actual rotation, you're going to want to hit your Iridius Fragment first, Ebb and Might, tip the Scales Fire Breath, get an Upheaval, and then hit your Breath. And then after that, you're just spamming Eruptions to keep your Ebb and Might buff up. You can throw in a Living Flame proc when it's maxed out to try to get an Essence Burst. You can get one there, but that's pretty much it. There we go, we got our Essence Burst proc. Get a couple of eruptions out. And then as you can see, if you do your rotation correctly, your Ebb and Might will be up pretty much permanently. See, it's already up again. We Ebb and Might again. Get our Fire Breath. Get our Upheaval. Always just one stack Upheaval. You don't need to do any bigger. The longer you empower it, you just get bigger area. Don't really need it. You're already max casting your Fire Breath to get Living Flame procs. Prescience also has a 20% chance to give you Essence Burst, so you'll randomly be getting bursts from that. Keep your Ebb and Might up. And that's pretty much your rotation, for the most part. You'll want to be some advanced stuff that you'll get into later, but you'll want to be lining up your Ebb and Mights and your Breaths with your party's cooldowns. But for the most part, you'll be slamming Ebb and Might on cooldown. Breath is when you'll be kind of timing that more with your party's cooldowns. Moving into some of our more supporty things like defensives and healing and utility. So you have your source of magic you'll put on your healer. And then as far as defensives go, we have Zephyr, which is incredible. What it does is it increases everyone's movement speed by 30% and decreases AoE damage by 20% for your entire party. So you'll pop that, everyone will be quick, everyone will be taking less damage. It's really nice, it helps your healer out a lot. Now, the new thing with Augmentation is you have Black Attunement and Bronze Attunement. I talked about it a little bit earlier, but what Black Attunement does, it gives you 4% increased health, and Bronze gives you 10% movement speed. And how these are augmented now with Augmentation is when you press hover, you actually give your party 30% movement speed. Or actually 40% because it's buffed there. And the flip side of that is when you press Obsidian Scales, it does reduce your damage by 30%, but it also gives your team 16% increased health. So you basically have a Rallying Cry. You have 2 charges of a Rallying Cry with Obsidian Scales. You have a Stampeding Roar with Hover. And then you also have your personal defensive. And that it just helps your healer so much. 1, being able to move quickly. Good, but 2, the 2 rallies is so nice. Like I said, it's 2 rallies, so you're double a warrior just by having your defensive, and that's up every 1.4 minutes. That combined with Zephyr and some of our other healing, you'll always have a defensive for something. So what is our other healing? Our big one that you should be popping pretty much on cooldown, it's 27-second cooldown, is your Emerald Blossom. You drop that and it heals allies after 1.5 seconds. You drop that on yourself, drop that on your tank. You have Verdant Embrace. There's a couple good uses for Verdant Embrace. One is to just reposition yourself, so you can fly over here and heal this guy. And it is a very good single target heal, as well as healing you. You can help your healer out with those 2. Your Living Flames can heal, especially when you have the Leaping Flames. So if there's only a couple enemies, you will just get some free heals out on other people with your Leaping Flames. And then we have Blistering Scales. So you may be thinking, why? What do you mean Blistering Scales? Don't you just put that in the tank? For the most part, yes, that will be on the tank. But if someone is taking a lot of single target damage, you can rotate your Blistering Scales as a pseudo defensive onto one of your other teammates. So I mean, say my training dummy here gets the dot from Sentinel Talandris in Uldaman. I would want to throw my scales on him because that gives him a very big shield, as well as giving them armor. And it will help your healer out in a pinch to just, you could Blistering Scale someone, Burden Embrace them, drop your Blossom, and that's just a lot of healing right there. That's going to help your healer out. Another one we have is Rescue. I mean, I can't rescue a dummy, but when you rescue someone now, like I said, we get that 30% shield over your maximum health. That's another pseudo-defensive / heal you can use to help your healer out. And that's pretty much all we have as healing capabilities. The only other things I would mention here are Cauterizing Flame, which you always take, the 40k heal, as well as removing any bleeds, poison, curses, or diseases. That's a 1 minute cooldown. And then your other detox or poison removal is a 7-second cooldown. So on bosses like Worm Boss and Neltharian's Lair, you're really, really, really useful to your healer here. You can help remove those toxins from your entire party with your healer there, which is going to be thanking you a lot for, he or she. Moving into what other utility we have. You're a support class, so you're going to want to be getting really good at using your utility abilities, because that's what you're here for. We do have a raid buff. Obviously, it increases everyone's, or reduces the cooldown of everyone's major movement speed ability. We already talked about Source of Magic. And so the other utility we have is Short Kick. We have a 18-second kick, which is just crazy short. You're going to be kicking a lot. And then we have Tail Swipe. So we have a knock up, and then we have a knock back. Those are both a minute and a half cooldown, but still very useful to have an AoE knock up or knock back that you can use as a pseudo interrupt or a stop. Hover, I mean, I'm going to call Hover a utility because you can just move and cast with it, and you can also reposition yourself and get movement speed. So you can be zipping around while moving, doing whatever you need to do. Other utility we have the Breath of Eons. We have pick up the stun here. We're gonna call that some utility. That's a big AoE stun right there. And then we already talked about rescue. Rescue is just a great ability. I don't think I can rescue a random person, can I? No, yeah. It has to be a team member, but most of you know what rescue looks like. And so all of those combined gives us a really, really unique toolkit. I've played it not a ton, because I haven't had a ton of time since I got back from my vacation recently, but I've already done a 20 with it. I've done a bunch of 18s with it. We'll be doing more 20s next week when the group's on. But it's really, really, really fun. It's a whole new way to play the game. Yeah. So, hope you guys enjoyed this. I know it's a little different than my usual content, but leave a like, comment, subscribe, let me know what you thought about it, and we'll see you in the next one.